Okay, so with this video, we're going to be graphing linear inequalities. That screen right there is what your note paper should look like. And graphing inequalities is not too bad, but we're working on ones that need to be rearranged before they're graphing. They're lines, obviously. So if that maybe makes you think of y equals mx plus b, that would be great. So think about this example that I'm showing here. In this example, we are not in y equals mx plus b, and we need to get there. So think about what you need to do. You need to subtract the 3x from both sides, and then you'll need to divide by the 2, and that will give you y equals mx plus b form for this. So now we have it into y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 4, because 8 divided by 2 is 4, and that would be graphable. So just make sure that that's something you still feel comfortable with. We've got to get some of these into form. If you look at that first example, it doesn't really need to be put into form, but what you do need to realize is that the slope is negative 1. So write out the slope is negative 1, negative 1 over 1. And the y-intercept, well, what is the y-intercept? There's nothing there. So the y-intercept is 0 in this case. So we need to actually start at 0. You'll notice the green is doing that. And then we want to go down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. Now think about whether it's a dotted or solid line. And at this point, hopefully, we're pretty quick at that. We understand it's a dotted line. So we draw a dashed or dotted line all the way through this. Then we can decide whether we're going to shade above or below. So we'll draw our dashed line here. Not our best. And then we're going to decide if we're shading above or below that. Okay, so now we got to think about where our man is on this mountain. And he is standing there. And it's a beautiful sunny day out, so we'll draw the sun in. He's excited to be hiking, so you see the ground is under his feet. And what else can we add to our picture here? Perhaps a seagull or two. So that's the sky above his head, and below his feet is the dirt, so that would be below the line. And if you look at where my purple arrow is, it says that y is less than, so we want to shade everything that's less, everything that's below his feet. So that's what we'll color in. Now you don't got to shade really, really dark, but you do want to get it so that I can see it, okay? So we have y is less than, that's everything below, and that's a dotted line. So that's pretty much what we're doing. If we look at example 2, that will kind of be pretty self-explanatory too. We got to get it into y equals mx plus b. So let's take a second to look at example 2. So for example 2, here's what we're trying to graph. We need to get into y equals mx plus b. So I would maybe bubble the y. Try to get rid of anything that's not inside of this bubble. So the 2x doesn't belong. I'm going to subtract 2x on both sides. And then that will cancel out. And I'll be left with, I think, negative 3y is greater than. Treat that like an equal sign, okay? So just treat that symbol like an equal sign. Don't do anything to it. Don't flip it. Don't change it for right now. And then we'll have, I think, either negative 9 minus 2x or negative 2x minus 9, depending on your preference on how you draw that out. And then we'll need to do a little bit more work to actually get y alone. We got that negative 3 there. So I want you to think back. If we're dividing by this negative 3, think back to inequalities that you might remember. What happens when we divide by a negative? And I want to really stress this point, so I'm going to make a whole bunch of color here so that you can see what's going on. This is the most important part of the lesson, so don't miss this. All right. Now I'll get rid of. All right, so we'll get rid of this stuff so that you can focus on it. So the big thing is that when you divide both sides by a negative, hopefully you can remember what happens. When you divide both sides by a negative, what happens? Think about that. So with an inequality, hopefully you can remember, you can recall from like chapter 2 that you flip the inequality symbol. So you'll notice here that we have flipped the inequality symbol because we divided by a negative number. Not because we divided into a negative number, but because we divided on both sides by a negative number. That's important. So when you divide by a negative number, you flip the inequality symbol, so we have y is less than 3 plus 2 over 3x. So pretty straightforward to graph it. Now that we know that, we go up to 3, we go up 2 over 3 a couple times. We have a dotted line here, so we'll make this line dotted. And then where do we shade, above or below? Well, we're supposed to shade below, and that's going to be below the mountain if you see the mountain in the sky there. And you don't want to shade it quite as dark as I'm shading here, so probably not the best choice for me, because that will make it really difficult when we get to our next section. So maybe just shade it lightly, but that's how we do that problem. All right? And I think from here, your job is to graph some of these. Oh, actually, a couple things we should remember before we get to that. So let's talk about these things. So these first two symbols, greater than or equal to, tells you to shade above, and that makes sense because it's greater. Less than or equal to, that's a shade below because we're less. And then we have a line underneath, that's the third one down, that's a solid line. So if you see a line, you draw a line. If you see no line underneath, that's a dotted. We want everything in y equals mx plus b form. It's not actually in y equals mx plus b. That's, see that line right there reminds you that's a solid line, and that dot that says dot, so for dotted. So get everything into y equals mx plus b form, but it's not going to be an equals, it's going to be some sort of symbol. So this is going to be for you to do. I'm going to do one example, but if you flip over, I think on the back of your page, you have 4 graphs, and here you have 4 equations. You want to just get some practice putting them into y equals mx plus b. It's a very common thing. It's a skill that we can't lose. So if you are struggling with that, remember to go back and look. So putting this into y equals mx plus b, we're going to divide everything by -4. So we get y equals -1/2 x minus 3. And then we could graph that if need be. So just keep that in mind. These are with equal signs, so we're just going back to an old skill now. I think the graphs are on the next page, and these 3 are for you to do. So this is going to be a now you try. So let's write that here. Now you try. So you do 2, 3, and 4. Put them into y equals mx plus b form. Find the slope. Find the y-intercept. And from here on out, you will flip over and then graph on the next page. I will probably graph number 1 for you. So let's take a look at number 1 real quick. -1/2 x minus 3. So let's split that. We go down to -3, and then we go down 1 over 2 a bunch of times. And it's a line, so we just do a solid line. It's not doing inequalities at this point. Just trying to get a basic idea. So hopefully that makes sense. So you do those 3, and then you graph them on these 3, and then you'll be in pretty good shape. And let's get into our next thing. We've got a couple minutes left here. Inequality on a coordinate plane, these types. So these types of inequalities, they might remind you of like an x type of inequality. Let me change that. Let's make sure x is, that's probably even too similar, so sorry. So we'll change this to probably like x is less than or equal to 3. So if you look, you make a number line, you put a 3 on it, you draw on a 4 and a 2 so you have some reference, and you make a closed circle because there's a line underneath, right? That's why, at 3, and then you point it to the left because the lesser numbers are to the left. That kind of looks like what it looks like I'm asking you to do, but you'll notice that it says in a coordinate plane here. So when we're doing a coordinate plane, we need an x and a y. If you think about graphing this line in the coordinate plane, on the actual Cartesian coordinates, you go to the x equals 3. Hopefully you can remember this. Count over 3, make a dot, and then it's a vertical line. X equals 3 is a vertical line, y equals 5 is a horizontal line. So vertical line at x equals 3. So think about this one. I want you to graph that line, but I want you to graph it with either a dotted or solid, and then shade above or below. So if we look at this one, let's make a coordinate plane here for it. One moment. We're going to want to go on the y-axis, so let's label our x and y-axis. Then we'll go on a y-axis to -1. So down here at -1, we make a dot, and we have a horizontal line. And it's dotted because in this example we're doing inequality, and we want to shade above. So we see it's dotted, we see we got to shade above. It's pretty obvious that above is above in this case because the line's not slanted. So we'll color everything in up here. So that's kind of what we're looking to do. Let's go to another example. Alright, on this one, we want to get into y equals mx plus b. So I would subtract the x from both sides, and I would have y equals, or y is less than or equal to, negative x minus 4. Draw my coordinate plane. I'll draw a nice pretty one here. And we want to go down to -4. 1, 2, 3, 4, the y-intercept. Then we want to go down 1 over 1, because this is technically a slope of -1. So down 1 over 1. It doesn't got to be perfect in this example. We're just trying to get you an idea. It's a solid line because there's a solid line underneath your symbol over here on the left. And we will shade below. So you might grow in there at this point, but we're kind of getting hopefully comfortable with that. So we're going to shade everything that is below that. So what I want to start talking about is that understanding that everything that colored in, if you pick any point that's colored in, it should work in that original inequality. That's something I wish I had spent a little more time with today. I'm going to have to spend a little time in class talking about that. So these are your Now You tries. I will see you soon. Give these a go.